This is Chapter 4, Evolution and Biodiversity. So starting off, we take a look at the Earth. What is so special about planet Earth? And how is life possible? Well, it's really the perfect mix. It's like that 1 in a billion chance opportunity to have all these things come together. And some of these things are having an atmosphere that can filter out radiation from the sun, but allow enough energy to come through to warm the planet to give us that perfect temperature between 0 and 100 degrees Celsius. We have that opportunity to have water in the liquid state that allows nutrients to flow from one thing to another, from inside plants and inside animals, and it also allows us to have these nutrients that are allowed to or able to mix from one thing to another and have chemical reactions take place. So there's a lot of things about planet Earth that really kind of make it special. And on top of that, of course, you have two different locations, or many locations, but two primary locations where you can have life exist. You can have it in the waters and, of course, on land. This is a little depiction of some of the progress or progressions that life has taken along the way. You can see, for about the first, billion years or so, you're really just kind of putting this soup together, this organic soup together. And eventually what happens is you get this first spark of life with these very primitive bacteria, prokaryotes, and they have a very disorganized nucleus. But eventually that leads into more complex bacteria that you have a true nucleus and eukaryotes, and ultimately that'll springboard into a larger variety of organisms. And of course, that starts in the waters and then moves on to land later. So I kind of like this picture here. It does a pretty good job of demonstrating within a 24-hour day how significant humans are in the whole mix of life. As you can see, the first third of the day or so, there's not a whole lot going on. It's, like I said, a lot of it's inorganic movement. And then eventually life starts to take place shortly thereafter. And you can see the progression, and I kind of like looking at all the different organisms in here and when they, first appeared and such. I find it very interesting that we have, fishes and lizards, amphibians, taking hold at a very early point in the life cycle. And again, how insignificant humans are, that we only appear 2 seconds before midnight if we view the life of the Earth for 4.5 billion years or so. We are very insignificant time period. What's also very interesting is the effect and the evolution and the changes that we've had in that short amount of time. So, how does a species change? Well, everything is continuously changing through evolution, and things evolve through that process of natural selection. Natural selection, of course, is the process of competing organisms, not consciously, competing organisms trying to find resources and pass off their genetic information to the next generation. And it's an ongoing process, and it's still going on today. The next thing with that is the adaptation. How do organisms adapt? Well, we need kind of two primary things to do that. You need this genetic variability, which gets into the genotypes, the variety of genotypes a species has. The more ability or the more availability of different genotypes expressed as the phenotypes, then the more opportunity you have for a change in a species that may be beneficial to it. Another way that a species can change is just by chance with mutations. In general, mutations are not a good thing. Species usually don't do well with mutations, but occasionally you run into a situation where a mutation will change a species for the better, and it's better able to compete for resources. Continuing this thought, we have the finches, the Darwin finches, And we can see how these birds may have had a common connection once upon a time, but based on their locations and what food sources may have been available, you can see where one species with a more stout, compact beak over a long period of time may have been more well suited with the food sources available in its particular location to eat nuts or harder food sources in comparison to a bird with a more narrow beak. This one may have been more available to eat things like insects, worms, whatever, that it can get this more sharp beak into. And again, it's not a conscious decision that these birds make. Says, oh, well, I have this kind of a beak, I will do that. It just so happens to occur over periods of time. So it's not a conscious decision these animals are making. They just happen to end up in that situation based upon their resources, their natural resources. So sticking with this theme, when does evolution work out? As we mentioned earlier, you need to have that genetic variability, that the species has to have the ability to have a variety of traits or phenotypes that it can produce. And then more importantly, or along that same lines, is those traits have to be something that it can pass on to the next generation. So you can have a species that can produce a trait, but it's only available to that individual offspring. It can't pass it to the next generation. So there's a variety of things that we can look at that species can have a particular inherited gene from a parent, but it's only to them. It's not something they would give off to their offspring. And the last idea here is that whatever traits you're passing off, they have to be beneficial. So if it's not beneficial, the species is just going to die off. It's not something that's going to help it. So whatever changes we make along the way, that species is going to have to be able to use it in a way that's more advantageous to the individual or the species. And adaptive traits. This is just the summation of these three things we just mentioned above. Adaptive traits is just something that allows an organism to better compete against its competitors in a population. So what about a species? Or new species, excuse me. Well, hybridization is when two species of, two different species, are able to crossbreed and produce a fertile offspring. So the new species is actually formed in the process. And I can think of several examples where you can have two species breeding and producing offspring, but they don't produce a fertile offspring. So they're all just a one-time deal. And one example of that is a mule. And this example here, which is my favorite animal, is the liger. Ligers are a cross between a lion and a tiger, kind of odd looking, but they don't go on to produce more offspring. They're sterile. So you can produce them, but it's, again, every time it's a one-shot deal. You're not going to form a new species of ligers, even though they are kind of cool. The next one is coevolution, in which you have two different species that are kind of evolving alongside each other. The nice example of that is the lions in the fields with the impalas, which are those really fast deer-looking animals. The impalas, of course, are fast, so they're able to mostly get away from the tigers, the lions. The ones that aren't able to get away, well, they leave the gene pool, and then only the fastest ones survive. But after time goes on, all the impalas would theoretically be faster than all the lions. So the lions have to evolve as well. So whether it's in their stealth-like hunting techniques or it's their eyes in which they can see them coming. I don't know. It could be a variety of different things in there, but you can see that each species will have to change over time in order to be able to compete for resources or to catch those resources that may be available. All right, we'll take a pause here. We'll call this the end of lecture number 1.